Hey everybody, my name is Alex with Hake Hardware, and in this video we are going to prepare our disks for Windows 11 so that we can use them in Docker using Ubuntu WSL. So this is the WSL method of preparing your disks, and if you're going to be using Docker in Windows, this is what I recommend doing. We're going to be passing through our disks directly into Ubuntu WSL and then accessing them in Docker, which is running on Ubuntu WSL. This is going to be the most efficient and best way to do it. If you're using an NVIDIA GPU, it works perfectly. You can also get access to your GPU in Ubuntu WSL and plot with it. So overall, I think this is a great option. It is kind of weird because we're going to be using Ubuntu on Windows, but if you don't want to install Ubuntu on bare metal and you are okay with just virtualizing it through WSL, it's a great option. So let's get our disks prepped, and it's really not that difficult. There's quite a few steps, but you should have Ubuntu WSL already installed. It's super easy. There's a guide here, just a few steps, and you can have it running, and everything will be working perfect. But I'm going to be going through this wiki, which is linked in the description of the video. Let me jump over to Windows, and the first thing we're going to do is open up our terminal. And we need to understand what physical disks we have access to. So just so you know, we're going to be wiping out the entire disk that we use. So if you just want to use a partition or just a folder on a drive, this isn't going to work. There might be some workarounds, but in this guide, we're going to be taking an entire disk. So if I go into disk management here, we're going to be taking this entire disk, disk 1 and disk 2, and mounting it inside of Ubuntu. So just keep that in mind. And the first thing we want to do is find out what the physical drives are. So we're going to paste in a command, and this is going to get our physical drives. So I'm actually in a virtual machine, so things might look slightly different. Mine are QEMU devices, but yours might list more specific information about your hard drive. I have 3 physical disks, and 0, 1, and 2. So there's 3 of these disks. Now, one of them is my operating system, and you saw me in disk management earlier. That's going to be a great way to find which disks you want to mount. So disk 0, disk 1, and if I make this a little bit longer, disk 2, that corresponds to 210, 210. So those physical drive numbers and the disk numbers correspond. So I know that I want disk 1 and disk 2. Those are the 2 that I'm going to be passing through to my Docker Autonomys setup. So I'm going to close that. And now that I know what disks I want, we can set up these disks to automatically mount. So it's a 2-step process. One is Windows has to attach these disks to WSL. And then the next step is inside WSL, we need to mount these disks so that we have access to them. In order to do that first step, we need to set up what's called a task schedule, or a scheduled task, I guess. So in the search bar, type task scheduler and open it up. And we're going to be creating a task. So on the right-hand side, there was that create task. I clicked that. And we're going to call this WSL disk mount, or I think, let's see, what do I have in the, I have WSL mount task in the wiki, and we're going to make sure we run it with the highest privileges. So make sure that is clicked. If you don't have that clicked, it's not going to work. We're going to go to triggers. We're going to create new trigger, and we're going to do at logon. So when you log into your computer, these disks are going to be attached automatically. Make sure it is enabled, then click OK. Actions. So this is where we're going to do the mounting operation. So under program script, we're going to type command.exe. That's going to be your terminal. And then there's going to be an argument that you need to pass in, and you can copy it from the wiki. But this is going to correspond to those physical drives. So I said I wanted 1 and 2, so I need to change this value to a 1 and click OK. And now I have 2 disks, so I'll create another action that we want to do. We'll put in command.exe. We'll paste this in there, and I want also disk 2. So now you can see if you just reference both of these here, we have physical drive 1, physical drive 2, and we're good to go from here. We have both of our disks. And if you have like 10 disks, yeah, you'd have to unfortunately do all 10 and just put the corresponding numbers. Click OK. Oops, actually don't click OK. You can just always just double click it. And you can, okay, so if you can't see, if you don't see all your triggers listed here, it's kind of a small window. Make sure you have task scheduler library clicked, and then you can just find the WSL mount, double click it, and then we'll go to conditions. I always uncheck everything. And then settings, I always check run task as soon as possible after a scheduled start is missed. So if for some reason it doesn't launch at login, it'll launch as soon as it can. I think that's what it does. Then click OK. So now we're actually done with it. And so there's a way we can check. If we go into WSL and we do LSBLK, I can see that actually they're already mounted. Hold on. Okay, so let's restart real quick. Oh, you know what? That's not going to matter either because I just set up the rule. But was testing this earlier and I forgot to reboot after I deleted the rule. So if you were to go into WSL and you do LSBLK, it's going to list the block devices and you're not going to see your disks listed there because they haven't been attached yet. And then what you can do is my rule is going to run. So you see these command prompts that come up. It's actually running the rule right now when you log in. So if you see those, that's totally normal. Once they go away, we can open up WSL here. So let's go into our terminal again and go into WSL and LSBLK. So the disks are going to be there because they're automatically mounted. But what you can do is in Task Scheduler, you can right click and do run, and it's going to run that task, just a one-off run. Alternately, you could reboot like I just did. And when you go into WSL now, you should see your disks. And this isn't just like a virtual disk. No, this is a physical disk that's been passed in to WSL. So we actually can format it with ext4 for the file system, which is really great. Typically on Windows, you can't access ext4 just because it's not compatible with Windows. But in this way, it's kind of like a workaround where we can get access to this disk. But we want to get it prepped. So the first step we're going to do is wipe the disk. So we're going to do sudo wipe fs, so wipe the file system. If you do this, you're going to remove everything from this disk. So just keep that in mind. Dev, and then you're always going to do dev, so device, and then we have SDC and SDE. So you typically don't want to mess with anything that has a mount point. So yeah, just make sure you're selecting the correct one. And typically you can tell based on the size which one you want. So I'm going to do SDC. And then I'm going to do sudo wipe fs -- all dev SDE. So I've just wiped those disks. There's nothing on them. And now we can put a file system on them. But we're going to put ext4 with some extra flags. And we're going to do sudo mkfs, make file system, ext4, and then -m0. So we're going to set reserved space to 0. So typically on an ext4 file system, there's some reserved space just so you don't fully fill up the disk and crash your operating system. But since this isn't an operating system drive, this is just a storage drive, we could use 100% of the disk and it's fine. So we're going to set reserved space to 0. And then we have -t large file 4. So this is a specific setting for Autonomys that's going to allow it to run a little bit more efficiently. You'll get a little bit more space out of your disk. And then you're going to put those two devices in there. So mine was SDC, I hope. And then I think the other one, let me just double check. LSBLK. Okay, we did SDC, now we're going to do SDE. And our disks are now formatted with the ext4 file system. Now what we need to do is that second step from the two steps I mentioned earlier, which is automatically have these disks mount. That way we can use them in our autonomous farmer. So we need to find the UUID. lsblk-f will give you your UUID. So I need this actually not that one. I need this one, and I need this one. So I'm just going to leave this up, um, and we're going to just go in and out of our what's called an FS tab, which is a file that automatically mounts disks at boot. But first, we need to create the mount points. So I have a specific way I like to mount my disks, and I do it in the /media. And for autonomous, I'll do it in /media/autonomous. So sudo make dir, make a directory, media autonomous. So the media directory already exists. It's typically like USB drives get automatically mounted in media, but you can mount your SSDs in there just fine. So we're going to create that folder. And then what I like to do is create a farm drive for each disk to mount. So I'll do sudo, I'll just press up key because I'm going to make another directory in that path and then do farm dash. And then I select the last 5, there we go, of my UUID. That way it's for sure unique. And then I'll do, just press the up key, delete the last 5, and then I'll go to SDE. Sometimes it's hard to copy. And then select the last 5, paste it here. And then if I do ls-l media autonomous, I can see I have these 2 mount points. So I have 2 disks. I'm going to be mounting them to these 2 locations. So if you're not super familiar with Windows or with Ubuntu and Linux, you need to mount your disks manually, at least initially, because we need to set up a specific mount point for them first. Okay, now that we have the mount points, we can create the entries in our FS tab, which are going to automatically mount these disks. And I know this is, if you're not familiar with Linux, this might all seem very confusing, but it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to do sudo nano etc fs tab, and that's a file, and nano is like a text editor. So we're going to open that up, and we're going to do some entries here. So UUID equals, and then what I'm going to do is Control X, Y, and enter to save. And I'm going to copy the UUID for my first disk. Then I'm just going to press the up key to bring up the last command and hit enter. And then I'm going to paste in that UUID. And then we'll finish it up. So we'll do tab, and we're going to put the mount point. So we want to mount the disk with the UUID that we specified at media autonomous farm dash, and then I'll just copy the last 5 because I know that's the naming convention that I created. And then we need to specify the file system, ext4. And then we're going to put some flags here, defaults, no access time, and no fail. We're not going to get into what those are, but I generally consider that the best way to do it. And then I'm going to do Control X, Y, enter. And then I'm going to copy the second UUID, press the up key to go back in. And you could probably just paste those to the notepad and then you don't have to go in and out, but I don't mind. UUID equals Control Shift V for me to paste that in there. Media, autonomous, farm dash, and then I'll grab the last 5 again. So I like to just do it this way. And you could just do like farm 1, farm 2, but again, I prefer to do it this way. And I put tabs between each of these. That's generally how most people do it. And then we'll do Control X, Y, enter. And every time we do that, it saves the file. And we need to basically reload this file. So sudo systemctl daemon -reload. And then finally, we're going to mount the disks using our fs tab file. So sudo mount-av. I have a typo here. So we can see one was successfully mounted. I did a typo, maybe you saw that. But let's just go back into our FS tab and update media, then Control X, Y. So really not a big deal. I messed up and we'll just reload. I'll reload that system daemon. and then I'll do sudo mount-av, and we can see this one was already mounted, and then we just mounted this one. And if I do df-h, I can see both these disks are now mounted, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted. We need to do one final step, and this is going to be something that you need when you launch your farmer in Docker, is we need to set the permission so that Docker can access these drives and read and write and do what it needs to do. So we're going to do sudo change ownership, CHOWN -R, nobody, no group, media, autonomous, and then I'm going to do every farm folder basically. So the asterisk is like every subfolder. We're going to set the ownership to nobody and no group. And if I do ls-l media autonomous, I can see nobody, no group for each of my farms. And this is just so Docker can access these drives. And that's it. Your disks are now all set up. You can go to the next step and continue with getting your autonomous network running on Docker. Thanks for watching. If it was helpful, please leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.